Darkness never dies in the dungeon. The Talisman expansion, that is. Yeah. Hello, welcome to the Bottled Imp.
Exploring the realms of fantasy.
My name is Ken Boyter, and today we're going to be looking at Talisman, the Dungeon expansion. Oh yes, it's a corner board for your base game of Talisman. So, let's go into the dungeon. Okay, so let's have a look at the dungeon. Now this is a Talisman expansion, so you will need the base game Talisman in order to play this. You can check out our review of that. We've also done a couple of other reviews as well, some other mini expansions, the Reaper and the Blood Moon. So what do you get in the box? Let's take a look. So you get quite a lot for your money. You get one dungeon corner board that fits snugly and nicely into the base game. Now this board is folded up just for the purposes of this review. Normally the base game board does come out and extends out further. You also get 10 new adventure cards. Here they are. There's 10. Look at the nice backs. Now they, as you can tell, they match the base game adventure deck, so you shuffle them and put them in. You also get 20 new spell cards. And again, as you can see from the backs, they are to be shuffled into the base game. You also get 128, look at those bad boys, 128 of them. I'll show you the fronts, some of the fronts in a minute. 128, these are the dungeon adventure cards. And you also get 10 treasure cards. And we'll explore the treasure cards in a moment. You also get 5 new characters. Here's a quick look. 5 new characters. There we go. There's the gladiator. And you also get the 5 figures. I'll just show you one of them. And these are painted. I painted these myself to a certain standard. They do come grey, so you can paint them yourself. The dice here that you can see, they're actually from the base game. I'm going to need them just to show you how the board works. So let's have a look at the board. The first thing you need to do is know how to enter the dungeon. Now the dungeon is where the treasure chamber is, and this is this square here. And you are trying to get to the treasure chamber, because that is where the Lord of Darkness resides. That's where he hangs out. And what you need to do is, if you are going to enter the dungeon, it's pretty simple. You roll a dice. So say for example you're the philosopher and you are on the tavern. You need to roll more than you actually need to get into the dungeon. So he rolled a 5, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Simple as that. If I'd rolled a 2, it would have been 1, 2, and you're not quite into the dungeon. You would have to wait if you wanted to go in and roll that on your next turn. The other thing you need to know about is movement within the dungeon. Now what you do is once you're in, you have to go, now I don't know if you can see the detail there, but there's some arrows, and you either move with the arrows or against the arrows. You can't split your movement. So say you were here and you rolled a 3, you can't go 1, 2, 3. You have to go 1, 2, 3 and fully take your go, just like the normal base game rules. Consequently, if you're going out of the dungeon, you find it a bit scary, you roll the dice and obviously you move like that. You can't go 1, 2, 3 and split your movement. Now to come out of the dungeon, there's various ways. One is obviously fleeing. You've decided, oh, it's a bit scary, too many monsters. I'm going to leave the dungeon. And again, you roll the dice and you do need more than you actually need. So it would be 1, 2. And say I rolled a 4 there, I'd have 2 left over, and I can then choose which way to go on the baseboard. Now, the other thing to point out with the dungeon is it is its own region. It's separate from the outer region, the inner region and the middle region, so that can have some consequences, because if you're in here and you pick up a card that says this affects this region only, then it is talking about just the dungeon region. Consequently, if you're in the outer region and it says you are affected in this region, it is talking about just the outer region and not the dungeon. So that's quite important to learn, because we played that rule wrongly when we first got the expansion. The other thing to know is you can encounter, I don't know if I've got any here, but these cards here, the dungeon cards, will actually, some of them do spit you out of the dungeon, whether you like it or not. So that's the other way of leaving the dungeon. There is another way, and that is when you get to the treasure chamber, but we'll talk about that in a second. Now, the next thing to do, I just want to point out a few that's really beautifully illustrated. The quality, as you'd expect from Fantasy Flight, is top notch. Really matches the base game artwork, and it's really detailed and it's beautifully done. It really gives you that sense of claustrophobia that you are actually going into a dungeon. So we have various, a few changes to the base game in terms of you land on the spaces, you resolve that space. And one of the changes is, instead of draw, a couple of them have draw 1 card, there are draw 2 cards. And this one says draw 3 cards. So obviously if you draw 3 monster cards and they're all strength, you add up the strength and you have to fight all those monsters, which is the same in the base game, but it's very rare that you'll be pulling 3 cards out. So there are quite a few of those. The dungeon is all about monsters and looting and traps, so it is potentially quite dangerous, and that's the fun of it. There's another one here where you can heal, you roll the dice to see how many lives you heal up, which is pretty cool. The other one is, I just want to draw your attention, is the monster pit. Again, you would roll the dice to see how many cards you draw, and if there's loads of monsters, you have to fight them. This one's pretty cool. If you are here on the summoning circle, that one actually means that you can pull an enemy that's face up already in the dungeon, and the nearest one you would pull towards yourself and you can fight it. So say you wanted to fight it, but you missed it on the way over because you didn't land on it, you would then be able to draw it near, hopefully kill it, and then add it to your trophies. So what happens when you get all the way through and you've survived the dungeon? Well, I will show you. You get to the treasure chamber, and that is where you have to fight the Lord of Darkness. Oh yes. With the Lord of Darkness, you cannot evade him, and you can't have anything else fight in your place. So say you had a follower that was, I think, the mercenary, you pay him a gold and he can fight in your place. Well, you can't do that fighting the Lord of Darkness. Consequently, you can't cast any spells that might conjure up something to fight for you, and you can't use any objects that do the same sort of thing. But you can use ordinary spells, so something that might, there's Sonic Blast, that will actually combine your craft with your strength. You can use that type of spell against him. The other thing then is that you will fight him as normal. You will roll your attack die, someone else for you will roll his attack die, you add up the scores, and whoever has the highest wins. And that's quite important about how much you beat him by. If you win, you do actually get one of these treasures, and the beautiful thing about that, look at that nice detailed back there. The beautiful thing about these is they're very, very powerful. There is a talisman in here as well. So what you do, if you beat him, you do get the choice. Let's have a look. Did I put the talisman in here? There you go. You do. So you can get a talisman. So you can get the choice of looking through these cards and choosing which one that you would like. Now with this one, there's some really powerful ones. It says here, during movement you may move any number of spaces up to your die roll. So there you go, that's the Clockwork Owl, which means obviously that's very handy. Normally if you want to land on something, you have to land on it exactly with the die roll. With this one it's saying no, you can move up to it and just land on it. So there's some really powerful cards in the treasure deck. If you do, if it's a standoff, if it's a draw, then nothing happens, apart from you have to exit the treasure chamber. If you win, you have to exit the treasure chamber, and if you lose, you have to exit the treasure chamber, and I'll tell you how to do that. If you lose, exactly the same as normal, you will lose a life, and yeah, but you don't get to pick a treasure. Now, this is the interesting part, and somewhat controversial. In the second edition, there was another dungeon board that they did. It wasn't as well designed as this. It didn't fit into the board, but they had the same thing. If you rolled a dice and you got a 6, you could go straight to the Crown of Command. Hey? You didn't even need a talisman. Now, in the base game, you need a talisman. You need to, in order to get to the Crown of Command, because you need one for the Valley of Fire. Here, it's saying no, you just go straight to the Crown of Command. And they've used that same mechanism, but instead of rolling a dice, like the old dungeon, for this expansion, you need to have beaten the Lord of Darkness by 8 clear points. And what you do is you will take his attack score and your attack score and minus his attack score against yours. So, and this is where my maths is a bit dodgy, if he, say, rolled a 6 and he's on 12 strength and 12 craft, you get to choose which one you fight him with. Then he had, say, a 6, that's 18. You'll need to roll, I think it's 24, and have an attack score of 24 in order to go to the Crown of Command. Now, I don't know if that's right, but to be fair, the dungeon is tough, so if you've worked your way through the dungeon and you've survived and you do beat him by 8 points, maybe your reward should be that you go straight to the Crown of Command. So, that's what happens. There are other things on the board, so if you subtract his total from your total, you can get kicked out at the crags, the forest, the chasm, the cursed glade, various other places on the board. You can then go back into the dungeon and try to win again. Once all the treasure cards have been taken, that's it. They don't go back into the game. So, let's have a look at some of the characters. 5 new characters. This is, as I say, this is the Gladiator. He's pretty cool. He has a good special ability here. You begin the game with a helmet, as you can see he's wearing it, from the purchase deck, which is always cool, a bit of an advantage to begin with. The other one is that whenever you use armor to roll a die to prevent the loss of life, you may add 1 to the score. That's pretty cool. And the third special ability, whenever you acquire a follower, they become trained to fight with you during battle, and you can then add all of their, well, it's actually, I think you get 1 strength per follower. Let's have a look. Yeah, 1 strength during battle. And what that means is you could have, say, 5 followers adding up, 5 extra strength. So he is pretty powerful. He's pretty good. The next one is the Gypsy. I won't read all the special abilities. She's a good character. My last game of Talisman was... I did play the actual Gypsy. She was pretty cool. Then we got the Swashbuckler. And also we have the Amazon. Ooh, very good. And who else? The last one is, he's a bit of a thinker. He is the Philosopher. So there we go. Again, nicely done. Good special abilities. And as you can see, I have painted them. I'll just show you briefly some of these. And there's the Gladiator. Pretty cool. Okay, let's move on to, as I say, you had adventure cards. Now these go into the base deck. These are mainly to do with getting you into the dungeon via the actual base board. So, for example, this one here, I'll just show you this one. This is that if you pick this up and you're in the outer or the inner region, that space that you picked it up in, that now becomes an entrance to the dungeon. So what that means is obviously on your next go you can go straight into the dungeon. So that's pretty cool. There's another one here that is Rune Gate, and that means there's quite a few, well, it's about 3 or 4 of these Rune Gates, and that means that if as they pop up during the game, you can hop between each Rune Gate. So if one appears in the middle region, you can jump from the outer region to the middle region. So that's pretty cool. The other thing is, yes, you do get spells, and again these go shuffle straight into the base game spell deck, and this one's pretty cool. This one is just an instant freebie. You get an extra strength. You cast it on yourself, you get an extra strength. And likewise you get a craft. This one you just gain an extra craft. That's pretty cool. This one's pretty cool. It means that after you've re-rolled for fate, when you want to roll for fate, so say you roll the dice and you don't get the score that you want, you will pay a fate, but then you choose the number on the die. So that's pretty cool. So there's some nice additions for the base game spells. And as I say, the last deck you get are these fantastic, really cool dungeon cards. And what these are is that when you're in the dungeon, instead of picking up adventure cards, you will pick up these ones. You'll pick these ones up instead. So when you're in the dungeon and it says draw 2 cards, you'll be drawing from this deck. And these, as you can imagine, is more orientated toward dungeon theme. Now look at this badass guy. Death Knight, he's pretty cool. Craft 8. So as I was saying, it's quite tough in the dungeon. Craft 4, there are some lower level monsters. It's pretty cool. Look at that, what was that? That was a Phantom Hound. Then you got a Miser Dragon, Strength 8. And this one's got an extra little one. If you win and you beat the dragon, you can roll a die and you see how much gold you can get. So they've added a few more kind of caveats to victory. This one, he's pretty evil. The Vampire Prince, Craft 9. If you lose against him, not only do you lose 1 life, but you also have to lose one of your followers. And if you haven't got any followers, you use an extra life. So these cards are pretty tough. You get followers. Oh no, that's another enemy. He's a Tinker Imp. That's another enemies. You get another. Look, Craft 10. Craft 10. Also, you get magical objects. So they're pretty cool. And one for Psychic. You get another. Some fantastic cards. So there we go. So lots of cool stuff. I would totally recommend this expansion. What it does do is it's similar in gameplay in terms of you know how to move, you know, on the base game. So the movement is similar, although you do follow a path around the dungeon. You have to go with the arrows or against the arrows. So you kind of know how it's going to work anyway. So if you're looking for another expansion to add extra, more stuff, if you like, but has a different flavour, then this one is definitely the expansion to get. They have released 3 other corner pieces. There's the woods, there's the woodland, I think it's called. There's also the city and also the highland. Now the city is slightly different, but we'll go into that. We're going to be reviewing all of these expansions. So I totally recommend this expansion for Talisman. Hope you enjoyed our review of the dungeon for Talisman. It's a lot of fun to play. You'll have a lot of fun, basically. Leave some comments. Let me know if you do buy it and you put it into your base game. Let me know how you get on. Remember, we are on Facebook and we also are on Twitter. Check us out. Until the next time, this has been another Bottled Imp review.